opinion. I also look at these things. I'm a sheet metal man. I do copper art, and I look at them as art too. These people, some artists, 150, 200 years ago, built these things, and they're beautiful. Not just the person that's on them, but that's a lot of work to do it. But that's all I had to say with that.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Senators, thank you for allowing this public hearing, and welcome. My name is Charles Marcella. I was mayor. I was actually a classmate of Mitch Landrieu. I went out to California, spent 8 years on the city council, and was elected mayor. I recently ran for Senate for the state of Louisiana. I have a lot of family in Monroe, Louisiana, and if you've ever been to Gino's restaurant in Monroe, you have. That's my grandfather. And Gino, through the Knights of Columbus, fought against the KKK in the 1920s. He was a great man, and I can only hope to live up to my grandfather. The thing I do want to ask you about is, before I start on this, is you passed Senate Bill 434, which actually delays the installation of the duly elected mayor and city council of New Orleans coming up this November to next May. And there's a lot of people that oppose that, and I don't understand the philosophy that you would interfere with the election of New Orleans coming up and not feel that you could interfere with what's going on right now in New Orleans. And I'll welcome questions on that later. I know RJ might want to talk to me on that. The League of Women Voters actually preferred that we go to that installation in January, because those people elected can implement their budgets, their appointments, and their other objectives starting in January, as opposed to giving 4 months to a lame duck council. It's never done anyplace else. We did not do it there. The other thing I want to point out is this bill that's in front of you is on military veterans. It is moving forward. It's not going in the past. And although I've made videos and studied all these 4 monuments heavily, and I would find that if you looked at these men, you have PGT Beauregard's statement of equal rights, one flag, one country, one people, which is very close to the Pledge of Allegiance we just said. We have Robert E. Lee saying slavery is a moral and political evil. And later today, the New Orleans City Council will hear talks about the fact that slavery is still persistent in New Orleans in the form of modern-day slavery and sex trafficking. And I think those monuments could have been used to help eliminate modern-day slavery. We also know that Jeff Davis empowered and started teaching his former slaves, and they were the first elected officials in Mississippi, and that the daughters of the Confederacy were not white supremacists. And when they raised these monuments and when they created the first Memorial Day, they actually put flowers on the graves of Union soldiers in Columbus, Mississippi. These women, as I've gotten to know them, have asked, give us back the monuments if you want. And I think what the city of New Orleans is doing at this point, saying they're going to put them in some place, a museum, and that if people pay money to go to that museum, they won't be offended seeing a monument to Beauregard or Lee, doesn't make much sense to me. Give them back to the people that raised the money to put them up. And in that regard, I think to have the residents vote, because in California we did use the initiative process, and it worked quite well on certain things. It was limited, but in a case like this, where the residents would probably overturn the vote of the city council, give them that opportunity. And these bills moving forward, which could apply to World War I veterans, Revolutionary War veterans, numerous other War of 1812 veterans, give the citizens that opportunity, because I think as there's a meeting coming up on June 17th about addressing this delay in installing the mayor, that the residents don't necessarily agree with the council. And I know as a mayor, I appointed those people on those boards. So we hear the fact that these boards agreed with the mayor. They should, because he appointed them. That's what I did. I appointed people to boards as mayor that agreed with me. The other deal I will say is the process was flawed. When Mitch Landrieu went to the city council, the city council president at that time did not let an opponent speak on any monument in the same context as Mitch. Mitch got his 10 to 15 minutes. All 4 were held at the same time. And then we went to public comments. Typically in our city council, we would let somebody speak for 10 minutes and then somebody speak in opposition for 10 minutes. And that would have been fair. New Orleans has a Heritage Ordinance provision, and my understanding was those commissioners were told not to apply that Heritage Ordinance to the vote they were going to make, to only look to see if this monument could or could not be a nuisance. So you have a city council, a city attorney interfering with the process. The other thing I would say is, besides those 2 deals, the monument should have been looked at one by one. They should not have been looked at all four together. So to go back and say that it's time for the state to intervene and give better direction to city councils, I totally think it's appropriate to do. And I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We could ask that, I'm gonna ask, you know, we're not a sergeant or just whisper in my ear. We're just not supposed to clap and just have a decorum here. So if you don't mind, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I would
Yes,
like to reserve my spot to speak when everybody returns to the board. I came all the way from Florida. I want everybody's undivided attention and the board to be full when I speak, please.
So I can't promise you that everybody's gonna be up here.
But where
at
did
the
they
same
go?
time.
I'm just,
You want me to share with you what's happening?
well, no, but I mean, I came a long way and
Okay. Let me just, so why
when I
don't you have
suffer
a
from panic
seat?
disorder, well, first of all, can I please stand because I feel more comfortable standing. I'm used to standing in front of a committee or in front of people.
Okay.
Okay.
So let me tell you what's happening. Couple of things. That room over there has coffee and water, and they also have bathrooms, so we have
Okay.
to go to the bathrooms. sometimes.
Well, that's fine.
Okay, so sometimes you go, and the second thing is that there are other committee meetings that are going on, and finance starts at 12. Some of the members on this committee also start, and Representative Carmody has not been, well, I mean, I understand you have a bill in finance, but this is your bill, so I would highly suggest you not leave, unless you don't want your bill to be considered. All right, I would highly suggest you not leave. We are here because of your instrument. Yeah,
Okay.
respectfully, I'm trying to be respectful to make sure that we hear from everyone who has given us a card. So, we're gonna hear from her, and then we'll have any questions. I think some members have questions.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
first of all,
Your name?
my name is Jenna Bernstein.
It's a
That is-
pleasure.
yeah,
Welcome.
okay.
Welcome.
Okay. I drove from Florida. If you
Welcome.
are not familiar with who I am, I'm the one that painted with spray paint for the Monument Task Committee when Antifa hung a scarf on Boulevard.
I'm not familiar with it. but-
Oh, well, I'll give you a little insight of who I am.
No problem.
I'm Jewish, and Senator Carter, I'm highly, 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 I can't even describe the words, when you want to use the Holocaust and my people and my ancestors that were a genocide with Hitler and comparing it to the war between the states as your argument? No, not on my watch. No, let me finish my speech.
Okay, let's just
Okay?
be, we'll
No,
be
I'm very
respectful.
upset. I'm very upset.
I know you
No,
are.
I'm very passionate about this
I know,
because
and I
I've
want you to
traveled
work-
many, many years.
That's why I want you to relax. Why don't you sit down? We're gonna listen to you.
I'm very upset right now because
I know. I
No,
don't
you
want to
have
be-
no idea.
Why don't you get some water? Seriously, let's take your time.
No, I'm
We are
very
here.
upset right now. I don't think you understand
I do
my
understand.
passion
I do.
for the free people of color that own slaves, for all of our American
I do.
history.
I do.
No, you don't. 'Cause your whole rant on white supremacy and what the monuments meant, but your historical outlook of what you Googled.
Do you know me?
No, I don't. When you read
How do
based
you
on
know
you,
what I feel?
honey, I apologize. I'm talking about
I'm
the
not
fact
honey.
that
My
you,
name is Karen
Karen,
Carter
you
Peterson.
read
I'm a
to me.
senator, and I've been in the legislature for 18 years. And you don't know me, and you don't know my history, which I'm happy to share with you. Do you consider yourself white?
I consider myself an American. I don't go by
Me
color.
too. Because you know what?
Amen.
Here we go.
Because you know, if you and I were shot together, especially in your 9th ward, which is the highest murder rate city in the country,
Exactly.
are they going to tell the blood difference?
No. Because
Thank
there
you.
is none. Because it's not
Exactly.
scientific.
Exactly.
Because this is all a farce. Back in Jamestown in the 1600s when they created this right thing. So you and me, we're number one human beings, and we happen to be American. So we're on the same page. Now you know a little bit about me.
Okay.
Okay. Have you done your DNA? Because I got mine.
Absolutely.
And I know
Absolutely.
that I got some white people, those that are called white people, that own some slaves in my family. And I got some slaves.
All right, and guess
Okay,
what?
so now we're on the same page.
Okay,
Cool
we're
now.
right.
Get some water, drink some
No,
water.
we're great. And
We're
the
good.
funny part is,
Now let's go.
I'm the one that, on my own accord, defended a public monument that was built by descendants of Confederate American veterans. Again, 1958, they're considered American veterans.
Okay.
Right, wrong, or different, they're American veterans. The same as a World War II veteran that you're so humble to say that somebody who saved which ironically, Truman did not let the Jews in on votes. The French and the British are the ones that helped the independence of Israel, not the United States. So please, let the Jews worry about the Jews' history, and don't bring in the Holocaust with a genocide of people and try to compare it with a fraction of two countries, which, when we seceded, and I say that as a Florida historian, let me finish. As a historian, it is what it is, I understand, but two fractions, the Confederate States of America fighting the United States of America, it was for, at that point in time in history, what it was. Money, like it always is. The petrodollar now, would you not agree? Would you not agree there's wars about the whole oil and we'll go on and
We don't
on?
want to talk about the president. We don't want to talk about
Oh, there we go.
national politics.
It
media.
all is a
We
bad
gotta
story.
get some wine on that.
Exactly. So you
We'll do
follow
that
my
after
point.
the hearing.
Well, there you go. So that's my point. What I'm saying is, what's really amazing to me is how that the East Orleans Parish, the East Orleans section, they want to secede from Orleans Parish. How ironic is it that when I was defending Beauregard, that I've seen people of color or blacks from lower income areas descend on it, saying, "Why was that taken down when there's murders?" When you're guarding a memorial for what you believe in, which Beauregard was my man, and I did that, and I had 60,000 views on Fox Live 8 as I cleaned it with E2 because I wanted him to go down with dignity. I knew he was going down, and I knew the way the mayor did it, and throwing them into a junkyard when it was supposed to be a controlled warehouse. You understand? I understand all of this. But as a Jewish American that comes from Florida and abides by her state and history of art and my own bitter state's history, it is what it is. It is what it is. I wasn't around for the Jim Crow era. I was born in 1969, so I'm not making any reparation. God bless you for it. There you go. The lunar landing, Woodstock, and the birth of us.
I know about all that. I was born in the same year.
So the lunar landing was, all I'm saying is many people that are black would stop at the memorial and
You don't know what that is. It's not
Exactly.
scientific.
Exactly.
We
Okay,
decided.
different colored people of different nationalities, especially the ones that built the levees that were of cheaper labor than another race that there's a Celtic cross for. Well, let's negate those because they were cheaper. The Chinese who built the railroad. I mean, we go on and on and on. My whole principle is there were people that cannot come forward in their race because they'll be called Uncle Tom. Just as in another race, they're white supremacists. It's all, you know, you are based on on people falling asleep, looking at their phones. They're not really appreciating the fact that I drove here.
We are.
You are.
No, they are listening. I have the board is lit up. You've got folks that want to make comments. People are listening to you. I want
I'm
you
just
to feel like
letting
people.
you know that this is a very impassioned plea.
I hear you.
And the people in New Orleans and the mayor with the white supremacy, I'm telling you, I know from my historical and from James Robertson, from historians, Scott Hardwig, who's a Gettysburg historian. I was there with all people, free people of color, everybody. It was embittered both sides.
Right. So there's the level of passion and emotion, I think, on both sides. Remember how I opened up the committee? We just want to be.
But we
able
want
to hear.
facts.
Right.
Are you familiar with Anna Kingsley?
I was reading facts to you earlier. We have historians that are coming. People are presenting facts, and we are receiving.
Well, I humbly
information.
disagree with what you read about the Liberty Monument.
That's
and
okay.
your fact. I have the right to. We have the right to disagree. The right to disagree.
I agree with you.
Right.
I agree that we have the right to disagree, and that's fine. And so you have submitted a card in favor of the instruments.
I'm just praying for the love of God because all other sovereign nations, because I was at Beauregard during Jazz Fest, your big Jazz Fest for New Orleans, before the boycott NOLA. I had people from other countries saying what a disgrace that the mayor took them down. Period. So I'm just letting you know. I'm just being the impassioned one to tell you the truth. Because I'm out, and I'm leaving your state eventually when hopefully General Lee, Right, Wrong, or Different was a work of art that's now in a junkyard, right? Not a controlled warehouse. All this, I'm done. I'm going to leave it to you to find it in your heart and read between the lines, because I know free people of color, Anna Kingsley, who in Florida, at the height of her plantation under Spanish rule, had 400 slaves and 35,000 acres, and God bless her, because she was a
What
very
does that
successful.
mean, that black people own slaves? What does that mean to me?
Did they whip them and kill them? Were they as brutal as the whites?
Yes.
Black? No.
There are monuments to her in New Orleans?
Yeah, not New Orleans. Not in your state, but it is in the country. And let's talk about Germany and memorials in Germany. Yes, there are ones for Rommel. There are ones for the German soldiers that there are documentations where Hitler at the park where he committed suicide.
So I think what we decided. And
I'm just
we're
letting you know,
born in
there
the same
are
year.
monuments in Germany for those
Yes.
people that
So what
served.
we've decided we're
Period.
born in the same year, and we have a difference in opinion on this legislation. And I
I'm
thank you
just
for being
begging,
here. I
and then
thank
he's
you for being
laughing
here.
and smirking, and you know what? I hope it's all on public record. So you know what? God bless you.
No,
God bless you.
I appreciate you coming. I
God
do.
bless you.
And I thank you for being
God
here and
bless you.
expressing your opinion.
You know what?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Whatever.
Okay. Senator Morrell for a question, then Senator Carter.
Thank you. Sir, what's your name?
Charles Marsala.
Charles Marsala.
I love it.
Yes.
Great guy.
All right. Mr. Marsala, a couple of points I want to clear up with you. First, you mentioned about the delay between the election and the inauguration day of the council and mayor.
Yes, sir.
The legislature has no control over the inauguration day of the council and mayor. It's a charter issue. Where the legislature changed the election date to the fall, that was actually changing the election date back to the fall. Under former Mayor Dutch Moriel, he changed the election date to the spring. The Legal Women Voters approached me, I authored that bill,
Yes.
to change the date because with the election happening during Mardi Gras, turnout was an issue.
Correct.
So the legislature moved the election date, which is in our purview, back to the fall. The council has to change the date to coincide in January to fix that. They chose to do that for a future council. So after this election, this one that's going to happen this fall, future elections will have the election for those local officials in the fall, and their inauguration will be in January. So I want to correct you because you seem to imply that we had arbitrarily kept this 6-month lame duck council, and the reality is my preference would have been to fix it at one time. The council didn't want to reduce their term by 6 months.
I appreciate that, and I apologize. I misread what I read in NOLA.com.
That's why I'm correcting you. Second, that quote you cited by Lee is an often cited quote, and it's from his letter to his wife in 1856. You left out half of it.
I'm very aware of the other half.
And the other half says, the blacks are immeasurably better off here than in Africa, morally and socially and physically. The painful discipline they are undergoing is necessary for their instruction as a race, and I hope will prepare and lead them for better things. How long their subrogation may be necessary is known and ordered by a wise and merciful providence. I think to leave that part off that quote kind of misleads people on the quote, because the first part of that quote is, I think that slavery as an institution is morally and politically evil. So on one hand, he thinks it's evil. On the other hand, he says quite plainly in the same letter, but I do think it's necessary that they be beaten and subjugated because they're better off here than they are in Africa. So before you drop a quote, and we're both politicians,
Absolutely.
before you drop a quote, make sure you include the entire quote in context.
Well, Senator, if I may, on two things. I'm glad to hear, so that if the city council in New Orleans would agree to move the installation date to January, the state has you would support that, and the rest of the state have no flips.
I would absolutely, it's their purview as the council to change their charter, and that's in their charter. So it's not an issue of, it's not in our purview to comment on their charter because they operate, City of New Orleans operates under a home rule charter. Certain rights regarding their governance are reserved to them.
But, so the state legislature then has no bearing if they were to change?
We have
Okay,
no more change. I would say timing-wise, the council passing an ordinance and the council putting a charter issue on the ballot would probably be in the fall at the same time. So at this point, it's kind of moot.
Sure.
Because they've already changed the charter to move their election date after this election. So the issue's been resolved.
What it struck me was, in the bill that I read that you had, the line was through the year 2017 and moved it back to 2021. And that's why I thought that there was a reason why that went to the city.
That was to coincide with the council had already done.
What they'd already done.
Yeah, we don't have authority over when they get
What was the
inaugurated.
reason for introducing it?
The reason we're introducing it was to restore the election date, which we do have purview over, to the fall, which is where it was before Mayor Morial.
Okay, so it's just on the election day.
Just on the election date. So,
Okay.
and the other part was just coinciding with what the council already did. So that's,
Okay, and then I would end in Mr. Lee's letter to his wife. If you read the end of it, it says that he cannot understand how Europeans who came to America, and I can't quote it because I didn't have the whole thing. If I had more time, I would have read the whole letter in my 3 minutes. But it says that he cannot understand how Europeans who would come over to America to escape impoverishment or whatever deals they were dealing with can stand up and allow slavery to continue. And that's not exactly the words, because it's been a few weeks since I read that letter, but I would present that as far as not dropping out the part about his comments, I would think that during that time, slavery in Africa, as we know, there were 80 million Africans moved to Arabia as slaves, many of them castrated. They may have been better off being in slavery in America than being in slavery in Africa or Arabia. I don't know the full context of what his statement is when he's comparing the life of...
Sir, respectfully, if you can't quote someone and then selectively apply context as you see it. He does not say the slavery in the United States is better than the slavery in Africa. You're adding lines to his...
Correct. That's why...
But the point I'm making is this. If we're going to try, first off, once you start looking at the letters between General Lee and his wife, things get very sideways and very colorful very quickly. So, honestly, the reason why when I used my quote earlier regarding this public statement about Confederate monuments is that was a quote he gave to the public in context of a very specific instance. When you start pulling quotes out of correspondence between him and his wife, it can get very, very complicated very, very quickly. I'll give you a great example. In a letter that Mary sent to her husband, she said that interracial marriage is out of the question, though occasionally a very low white woman marries a black man. I'll tell you, my wife's a white woman. I think she would be very upset if we thought of that she's low because she married a black man. But what I'm saying is that if you choose to quote someone, the advice I would give you is that if you're going to provide a quote, you have to give full context. I don't think we can go back and forth on the internal meaning of what General Lee said, but it's very telling that his public statements on this issue are very clear, and that individuals constantly pull select quotes from letters to contradict that. And so I would caution you, the reason why I want to give you your quote in context, I appreciate that you have a different interpretation of the letter as you add things to it, but generally speaking, it is beyond doubt that in his time after the war, General Lee did not believe in Confederate monuments, and General Lee did not fly the Confederate battle flag. Now, those are two things. Those are not questions. Those are facts.
I'm fine with those.
Okay. And so
we also know that...
Also, you gave some arguments regarding how the process was flawed in New Orleans. There have been, at this point, I want to say 5 or 6 lawsuits that have gone through the entire process. And all the... was that? 12 court hearings. All the arguments you said, those arguments were made in those court hearings, correct?
No.
They were not?
No, sir.
Then whatever lawyers were hired to represent those groups should check their legal malpractice if those arguments were not made. Because if you're saying that there was some violation of due process or law, those arguments should have been included in those lawsuits.
When the hearing happened in the federal court, I went to that. The judge gave them...
Which one?
The one in Judge Barbier's court.
Okay, because there were multiple hearings.
Sure. The hearing in Judge Barbier's court, sir.
Okay.
And at that hearing...
Which hearing?
This would have been in early January.
This is like the... Okay, so there's been 2.5 years of hearings. If at no point in this process those lawyers cited those things that you stated, that's a problem for those lawyers. They should have brought that up.
Well,
those are actually, I mean, if what you're saying is that a mayor contacted a board and told that board before their hearing to vote a certain way, that should have been part of the hearing.
I didn't say that, sir.
You said that the individuals on the historic commission were appointed by the mayor.
I said that.
Obviously did his bidding.
I didn't say the second part.
Now, if you're implying they independently decide to do what they thought he wanted to do, that's one thing. If you're saying, it seemed like to me, and I might have misinterpreted, I apologize, that you were implying that somehow the mayor exerted pressure on them to do those things.
What I said, sir, was as a mayor, I appointed people that I felt had similar views to myself. And often those were campaign donors and people that endorsed me. So I would have put on a board people who had a certain inclination to vote, knowing their history and having known them. Okay, I didn't necessarily, and we did interview people, and there was some, obviously you have some great people that get on. It's not as simply as putting things straight through. What I said though was, from what I heard from people, the city attorney was told them not to pay attention to the Historic Preservation Ordinance of the City of New Orleans, which is Chapter 84, which says monuments are to be protected and preserved and used for education and the economic welfare of the city. That was not told to those members, and it was not said publicly at any city council meeting or any hearing before the residents could know that.
Listen to what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
You just said, on the mic, under oath, the city attorney told these members not to apply a provision of law that would have been applicable. As I said previously, if that occurred, that should have come out in the hearing and that should have been considered by a judge. Our job as legislators, it seems like that particular part of your testimony, you're relitigating an issue that's already been litigated literally to death. It's been litigated. I'm an attorney, and 12 hearings on a singular issue is pretty impressive. If that issue didn't come up, I would argue that those individuals that hire those attorneys need to go have a conversation about getting their money back. That's a very important key argument that should have come up in the course of the hearings.
And I presented to this board that for those reasons, as this board articulated that earlier, that there was fair hearings, and there's no reason for you to interfere with the city of New Orleans, that given that, you should not suppose that, because you opened this presentation by saying that given all those hearings, I've not interrupted you, sir. Just let me finish. Okay. Given that presentation early, that it would be incumbent on this board to try to give the citizens of any city in New Orleans the chance to vote on a procedure in front of them. And that's what we're looking at moving forward. So to base it on having New Orleans done everything perfectly and therefore you don't need to intervene, I think that's incorrect.
Okay, well, a couple of things there. First, you providing ex parte testimony about something you think occurred does not suddenly make all of those hearings not valid. You brought up an anecdotal story about a commissioner maybe hearing from a city attorney. The reason why I kept telling you, and I'm telling you again, it should have been brought out during the course of a hearing is because the reason why you have lawsuits and you have judges and you have a process is that should that issue been brought up, it would have been verified, individuals would have been subpoenaed, and there would have been a public discourse on whether something occurred. You coming to a committee and saying, I heard stories about this happening, does not make 12 legal hearings suddenly invalid. That would be akin to me saying that if I lost a court case, I could then go outside and yell to the stars, I have new evidence that I can't prove, I want a new hearing. There's a reason why courts don't allow that. So I appreciate your anecdotal story. It should have come out in the hearing because then we'd know about it and it would be verified and it would be fact. Right now, I know you're not an attorney, but when you tell someone or you present to a committee a story you heard, it's called hearsay.
Respectfully, sir, I was at the meeting where the city council voted. I was in the judges in the court where that presided. The city attorney not once said there's section 84 and as council members you should do it. I went back to the city council the following month, it's on tape, and told them that my city attorney would not let this have gone down the way your city attorney went down. There's not hearsay. That was an interaction with me directly with the city council.
Then you should have brought it up at the hearings and it would have been part of the litigation.
To my knowledge, the judges prevented it from going to trial.
I think that is a complete misunderstanding of the legal process. That the judge is not prevented to go to trial. The issue is that the proponents have lost on summary judgment on every occasion. That is the process. If you don't have enough facts to go to trial, you don't go to trial. But thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Carter, and then Senator Tarver.
Briefly, the lady that was here earlier, I guess Ms. Rubenstein, is gone, but I want to address a comment that she made. And I'm a little confused as to why she was offended or upset, particularly since my comments were in defense of the Jewish community. It was not in any way, I'm not sure how she interpreted it or what her anger was about. My comment was to say that I would be equally as upset and equally as offended and equally as passionate as she was if there were a statue erected to celebrate something as horrific and as inhumane and as horrible as our Jewish brothers and sisters had to encounter with the Holocaust. The same level of passion she feels for that thing and that atrocious behavior and treatment of human beings is equal to the passion that I and African Americans feel when we see people celebrate the atrocities of slavery and the pain that it has caused, and those who would like to celebrate those memories. That's my point. We can agree to disagree. We can agree that all history is meritorious of remembering so we don't repeat it. But there's history that should not be celebrated. The Holocaust should not be celebrated. The Confederacy and slavery should not be celebrated. That's my point. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can I just answer something?
Thank you, Senator Tarver. I'm sorry, sir, we have a number of other people that need to speak. And Senator Tarver's next.
Madam Chair, we are here dealing with two bills.
Yes, sir.
One from the Senate, one from the House of
Yes, sir.
Representatives. Has nothing to do with New Orleans. New Orleans monuments are down and over, has no discussion at all in this committee concerning these two bills. I think that you ought to direct these people who make a discussion to direct on bills, the bills we're dealing with right now, and not on New Orleans, or what happened even in Germany with Hitler.
Yeah. Duly noted, sir, and I certainly can't dictate what people have come to say, but I think everybody understands that we have two instruments, and so we'd ask you to try to keep it to the issue that's before the committee today. The next, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
The next folks that are here, Aaron Hergert and Aretha Raina Green. I want to repeat their names. If they're not here, we'll keep moving. All right. We also have Philip Capel